On the 1st of November, 1918, one of the deadliest train crashes in American history took place in Brooklyn, New York. Known as the Malbone Street Wreck, the disaster killed at least 93 people and injured more than 200 others. It remains the worst rapid transit accident in the United States, a tragedy born of poor training, mechanical issues, and a series of fateful decisions. In 1918, New York City's subway system was still relatively new, but already essential to daily life. The Brooklyn Rapid Transit Company, or BRT, operated lines connecting Manhattan, Brooklyn, and beyond. The network carried millions of passengers each week, offering an affordable and efficient way to move across the growing metropolis. But beneath the surface, the company was facing difficulties. Workers were striking over pay and conditions, and the First World War had drained the labor force. Management often relied on hastily trained replacements to keep the trains running. On the evening of November 1st, one such replacement was at the controls of a crowded subway train. His name was Edward Luciano, a 23-year-old dispatcher with little practical experience as a motorman. With much of the trained workforce absent due to the strike, Luciano had been pressed into service after only a few hours of instruction. At around 6 p.m., Luciano was tasked with operating a 5-car wooden elevated train along the Brighton line, carrying commuters home through Brooklyn. Many passengers were returning from work, eager to begin their weekend. Almost immediately, there were signs of trouble. Luciano reportedly struggled with the controls, overshooting platforms and braking too hard at stops. Passengers noticed the rough handling, but assumed it was a temporary inconvenience. As the train continued south, it approached the junction near Prospect Park Station. From there, the Brighton line entered a sharp curve beneath the street level, a tunnel cut under Malbone Street. This curve, known to engineers as Dead Man's Curve, had a speed limit of 6 miles per hour. Luciano, however, was traveling much faster. Estimates suggest the train entered the curve at 30 to 50 miles per hour, at least 5 times the safe limit. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. The wooden cars derailed, slamming into the concrete walls of the tunnel. The first car managed to scrape through, but the second and third cars bore the brunt of the impact. They splintered against the tunnel walls, their wooden frames torn apart. Glass shattered, metal twisted, and passengers were thrown violently from their seats. Inside the confined space of the tunnel, the scene was one of chaos. Survivors recalled screams, the crash of timber, and a sudden darkness as lights were destroyed. Those in the middle cars were crushed in the wreckage, pinned by seats and splintered beams. The rear cars piled into the derailed coaches, adding to the destruction. When the train finally came to a halt, the tunnel was filled with debris, broken wood, and the cries of the injured. Many passengers had been killed instantly. Others were trapped, badly wounded, and calling for help. Above ground, local residents heard the crash and rushed to the scene. Police, firefighters, and volunteers quickly joined them, pulling survivors from the wreckage and carrying the injured into the night air. Hospitals across Brooklyn were soon overwhelmed by the number of casualties. The scale of the disaster was staggering. Official reports listed 93 dead, though some estimates placed the toll even higher. More than 200 others suffered injuries ranging from broken bones to life-threatening trauma. The victims were ordinary commuters, shop clerks, office workers, laborers, and their families. Many were young men and women in their 20s and 30s, their lives cut short in an instant. Public outrage was immediate. Newspapers carried harrowing photographs of the wreck, describing it as a massacre. The BRT came under intense scrutiny for its decision to allow an untrained dispatcher to operate a passenger train. An investigation revealed multiple contributing factors: Luciano's inexperience, the company's disregard for safety during the strike, the use of outdated wooden cars that shattered on impact, and the dangerous design of the Malbone Street curve itself. In the legal proceedings that followed, Luciano was arrested and charged with manslaughter. However, he was eventually acquitted, with the court recognizing that the BRT bore greater responsibility. The company itself faced lawsuits and heavy criticism, but no corporate leaders were ever criminally convicted. The disaster left a lasting scar on the community. Families mourned lost loved ones, while survivors struggled with lifelong injuries and trauma. The Malbone Street Wreck forced changes in New York's transit system. Safety standards were revised, speed limits were more strictly enforced, and wooden subway cars, prone to splintering and collapse, were gradually phased out in favor of sturdier steel construction. The curve beneath Malbone Street remained a point of infamy. Though still in use today, it has been reinforced with strict speed controls and automatic braking systems to prevent a similar disaster. More than a century later, the Malbone Street Wreck remains the deadliest accident in the history of New York City's transit system. It stands as a cautionary tale of how haste, inexperience, and disregard for safety can combine to produce catastrophe.